First things first, Paul, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Glad to be here.
Well, before we talk about the record, let's go back to the beginning first.
Okay.
Do you remember when you realized that you loved singing for the first time?
Well, I mean, really loving it. When I was about 4 years old, I did my first singing solo in church. And ever since then, I fell in love with it. And I never thought I'd be doing it, as a job, or as a thing. But I always loved it. And when I was about 4, though, that's when I really was like, oh man, I love this.
It was church where you first got introduced to singing. So was music always around you growing up?
Yeah, my mom. It's bizarrely enough, my mom played piano, and she would sing, and my sisters could sing a little bit, and I was always around it. Music is to me was what kind of moved me. I was very limited in what I could listen to. It was purely gospel and a little bit of soul music, and that was it. That's all I could listen to.
What were the first soul records then you got into?
The first one I got into was actually like a 70s, or it was the Stylistics.
Okay.
And then Sam Cooke came along, and then old school Marvin Gaye, not Let's Get It On Marvin Gaye, like it. I heard it through the grapevine. Nothing bad, I guess.
So what was it like? Getting into, did you have a preference in that sense, that because you were kind of forced to listen to those kind of, or limited to those kind of styles of music?
Yeah, it was, I think though, growing up in a small town in Alabama, you don't really know that you're that limited. I mean, granted, you have the internet and all that stuff now, but that wasn't something that was super prevalent, and so I think after that you kind of realize, oh, there's this whole big world. But I obviously, I still love listening to soul music though. I mean, it's something that never went away. Some of the gospel stuff I got really tired of, and felt forced, but I still, I could still listen to some of that Sam Cooke stuff, and God, it just hits me just right.
Did you have a period of kind of branching out to rebel in a sense?
Well, not until I was about 18, 19.
Okay.
Which is bizarre, I was a good little kid, they said do it and I did it, But I was about 18, 19, and my worldview got a little bit bigger, and what's bizarre though is like I still to this day, like, I don't think I've ever listened to a Who record in full, which is bizarre. Because I didn't grow up with it, and so, but one of the first people I ever listened to was Tom Waits. Okay. Which is kind of like a left of center type thing to start with, but I don't know how it got connected, but I loved him, and that was the beginning for me of like this whole new world of music.
So you mentioned you sang in choir in church. So at what point did you think, well, I want to pursue this further?
Well, till I was about 18, 19, I wanted to be a preacher. That's what I thought I wanted to be. I didn't have any aspirations to be a rock star, or be a singer, or anything like that. I never thought that was going to be possible. But when I hit about 18, 19, I started doing these open mic nights at these bars. And I'd learned guitar, and so I'd sing and play, and people would be like, "Well, you got a pretty decent voice, but you're a terrible guitar player," and I'd be like, "All right, well, maybe." But I fell in love with it that way, and writing my own songs and going from there.
What type of songs would it be? Were they similar to what?
Super shitty, super awful songs. They were. I mean, they were all like three or four chords, because that's all I really knew, and so. But I would sing the way I sing, and. So I would try and fit it, and they were fine. I mean, they were fine. I mean, I think about it today, I'm like, oh God, it's awful. But I think now, I mean, then it was wonderful.
Well, looking back then, is that something you had to go through to end up kind of where you are
now?
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you have to better, the one story I can always say is the betterment as a musician from that time. Because in church, it was just about singing and that's what you did. But as a musician, like, in the church, church circle is a very small circle. Mm-hmm. You can be a big fish in a church circle. Right. When you get out into the world and you start, you get into the local scenes in Alabama or even anywhere. You start. There's a lot of great musicians out there who do a lot of great things, and so I think it's a key step it's also being able to recognize where you're at as a musician, you know.
And after that, was becoming a preacher, was that done away with?
Well, yeah, I mean, I started, you know, the way I grew up, like, you know, people in the church would be, you know, anti-homosexual or something like that. Well, I'm not, you know, and so you just disagree with things like that, and you're like, I think you fall out of love with that aspect of it, and the small kind of group of people I grew up around, like that was kind of a thing, and you're like, that's not me, and that's not who I am. So no, I just fell out of love with it, to be honest.
And what has been their reaction out of, for instance, from your parents? Because you say you were brought up quite strict.
Yeah.
So what has been their reaction to you becoming this musician and going all over the world?
Well, no, they've also had a little bit more world experience too now, okay, which is good. But my mom liked the aspect that I was musical. You know, I cuss a little too much on stage for my mom, you know. But they themselves she was pretty happy. My dad, it took a little time because my dad works for a construction company, and so they believe, you know, hey, put your head down, work hard, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so singing in a bar is not a good living, you know. But now, obviously, you know, I'm here in the Netherlands, you know, and you know.
You kind of convinced them that.
I think everything's good now.
Okay. So well, if we go back, you did those open mic nights.
Yeah.
So when did St. Paul and the Broken Bones kind of come into the mix? Because I believe it was when you met Jesse.
Yeah. Well, so me and Jesse, who's a bass player in this band, we've been best friends for about 8 years. So I did those open mic nights, and I was working, you know, doing all sorts of stuff, and it's been kind of an interesting journey. But then I started my first band I ever been in. I was like, all right, started it. And Jesse, I somehow got connected through one of the guys there. Jesse became the bass player in that band. Okay. And so so we met. The moment we met, it was like, oh man, we're gonna be good friends. And so we had kind of, that band had quit, pretty much stopped. And I was unemployed, so I had to figure out what to do with my life. So I went back to college and didn't get a college degree. Was trying to become an accountant and was working at a bank. And Jesse was playing with another band, doing his thing, you know. And so he calls me up one day and he's like, "Hey, Paul, we need to record our musical relationship." And I said, "Sure." And that's when it happened. It was our last hurrah because we were all like, "All right, we gotta go get big boy jobs and quit chasing whatever we're chasing, whatever that might be."
So was it really that mindset of let's get it out of our systems,
yeah,
and then go back to the real world?
Absolutely, it was. I mean, the first song we did is a song of ours called "Broken Bones and Pocket Change," which ended up being a St. Paul Broken Bones song, and we wrote that song, and I was like, "Uh-oh, this is something." Like it felt different, and Jesse just decided to write songs around my voice. And instead of kind of trying to combat that, and so we did that. And Jesse knew all these guys that play with us in the band. He's a lot more social than I am. I'm a bit of a hermit, you know. Okay. You know, I like people, but I don't go out much. And when we got in the studio, we started playing, and we were like, oh, we got a band.
So was it initially just the two of you kind of making up these songs?
Yeah.
Was there a vision then of how it? Because obviously you have those soul records in your minds. And
yeah. No, not really. I mean, the only thing I was very adamant about with the whole thing was horns, having horns. I was like, gotta have horns in the band. That was the only thing I was like, we gotta do that. And so that in turn, I mean, you're gonna make soul music probably with that. But no, there was no like clear vision of like, this is what it is. It happened very organically, which was nice. It felt like a kind of a natural progression to where you're like, oh, here we are. This is great.
Was there maybe a hesitation or apprehension about becoming kind of a novelty, making it a novelty thing with all the lately music is looking back a lot more, looking to the 70s, 60s?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll always be that concern because it's a very thin line. You know, you don't want to be a novelty act, you don't want to be, but at the same time, you know, I think about records I love. And a lot of them were made in the 60s, you know, and we don't really view ourselves as like a retro soul act. You know, I mean, we started doing a Radiohead song in our we started to do a Radiohead song in our set. You know, like things like that. Like, we don't view ourselves in that way. But I mean, yeah, you don't want you want this to be for real. But the thing is, we're from Alabama. Like, we're not from Maine. You know, like, it's in our region. So it's not. I don't think it's too far flinged.
So when it came to the recording of Half the City, well, I believe the mixing was done in Muscle Shoals. So was that a big part of it? Was it something you kind of really wanted to do?
Bizarrely enough, no. It's not something we really even thought about.
Okay.
Bro and Al, who's our keys and keys player and our guitar player, are both from the Muscle Shoals area.
Okay.
And so Browan's really good friends with Ben Tanner, who plays keys with the Alabama Shakes. And Ben wanted to produce our record. Well, Ben lives in Florence, lives in the Muscle Shoals area. So we recorded the record up in Muscle Shoals, and then we mixed it. And then once we were like, oh, this is what this is, we mixed it at Fame. And so that just kind of happened because Ben was the only one interested in doing anything with us. You know, nobody knew who we were, no one cared. And
so before meeting Ben, then was the mindset still, well, we're gonna make this and then? Yeah,
I mean, it was a situation where we're like, we're gonna give this the old college try,
right?
And then you know, see what happens, and then go from there. I mean, we weren't expecting. I mean, I wasn't expecting any of this. I mean, I don't know what band. I mean, maybe there are bands that go into like, this is what I expect. But I mean, really, I was my life trajectory was like, all right, I'm gonna go be an accountant, gonna go get married, and that's my life. And so it was still before Ben came around. And when Ben came around, and then when our manager, we recorded the record. You know, we wrote the record in like half a month or a month or so. Wrote I think 75 to 80% of it, and then recorded it in 5 days. And so after that, we got a manager, and she changed the ballgame for us. And then that's when it was like, oh, this is about to be something.